Good evening. We'd like to welcome and thank everyone who decided to take time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight. You are in for a treat this evening as we begin this holiday season with a live read of 10 Things You Were Supposed to Learn from Donald Trump by AlexCarlisle. Tonight's event is sponsored by none other than the AlexCarlisle Group. I'm your host, Bob Dunsworth. Tonight's piece is the debut book of AlexCarlisle that takes a look at none other than Donald Trump, an American president and businessman that has had a significant impact on our politics, our history, and our identity as a nation. Carlisle's assessment of President Trump is not to glorify or slander him. Carlisle cuts right through the hype and asks simple questions that make us all think. Tonight's reading will be done by Robert Howard, the narrator of the audiobook. The reading will be from the first 3 chapters of the book, which is a generous presentation, so in the interest of time, we will limit the presentation to 45 minutes. However, for those who would like to continue listening, we will have a special offer at the conclusion of the presentation tonight. Without any further delay, let us begin. We ask that you sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's presentation of AlexCarlisle's 10 Things You Were Supposed to Learn from Donald Trump.
Chapter 1. Prenup. Believe me, there's nothing fun about it. But there comes a time when you have to say, "Darling, I think you're magnificent and I care for you deeply, but if things don't work out, this is what you're going to get." Trump on prenups. Donald Trump is equally famous and infamous in many aspects of his life. If we're talking infamy, marriage is certainly one aspect of his life that comes to mind. Not only has Trump been the first president to be married 3 times, but he has managed to maintain a well-developed brand, social status, and undoubtedly secure generational wealth for his heirs. That is not the case with every high-profile marriage. Several divorces have become fodder for the tabloids and other media outlets. What is it about Trump that has stood the test of 3 marriages? Besides being known for his career in the real estate business, amassing billions of dollars through creative deal-making, the former president of the United States has also done some of his most shrewd negotiations, not in the boardroom, but the bedroom. If you have watched the tabloids or listened to any talk show, you can be sure that many people don't survive 1 marriage, let alone 3. So what is the secret? Trump has managed to keep his empire, his house, and his head. That's more than many poor schmucks out there, and that's saying a lot. When the average person thinks of a prenuptial agreement, it usually applies to the rich and famous. That, unfortunately, is the first mistake, according to the American Psychological Association. The division of property is tremendous work simply because couples do not keep records of who owned what, before and throughout the marriage. Therefore, each spouse should carefully develop their agreements so that the terms are more likely to be respected. Prenuptial agreements will significantly reduce cost, time, not to mention the emotional duress of taking a divorce to a combative trial. These contracts usually include anything from money, property, reputation, or anything considered valuable enough to protect. According to a spouse's changing lifestyle, wealth, or growing family, the contract or agreement can be modified throughout a marriage. Most importantly, it doesn't have to involve a wealth specialist, but it would be good to have an attorney look over the agreement to see that everything is legally binding and in order. According to the former president, "Marriage is a contract unlike any other contract in life. You marry for love, but your signature on the marriage certificate is all about rights, duties, and property. It's a legally binding contract that knows nothing of love. If the love dies, all you have left is a resentful ex-spouse and the marriage certificate. There's nothing more terrible than an ex-spouse with a 10-ton axe to grind and no agreement on how your common property is to be divided. It usually leads to an all-out war that is more vicious than any legal battle in business and could easily lead to your financial and emotional ruin. Always get a prenup. It's just too risky not to." Donald J. Trump. Think big and kick ass in business and life. Judging from the above statement, we can safely assume that it's common for wealthy people to require prenup agreements upon their marriage so that the wealth or certain assets can be safeguarded and protected in a divorce. I believe a paradigm shift is long overdue. Not only should those people of substantial means get a prenuptial agreement, but everyone should have some sort of prenuptial agreement. Trump himself said it was a dirty process. Indeed, it's uncomfortable, if not downright antagonizing. But it will save many battles, breakdowns, and the War of the Roses if what's most important in keeping the marriage together is discussed in the beginning. Will this guarantee the divorce rate will go down? No. but it does require both parties to take a sober look at what's at stake. If you love me, you will sign the prenup. If you love yourself, you should make sure it's notarized, video recorded, and then kept in a secured location if needed for future reference. I'm not joking. The art of deception, delusion, and cry me a river are at an all-time high. Television programming does little to quell the issue. Looking at the failure rate of marriages in America, there needs to be a more proactive approach. There is premarital counseling, yet it has done little to prepare or equip couples for decisions in their lives. All of the marriage counseling in the world has not stopped divorce rates from climbing to staggering numbers. Every failed marriage is an indictment of how ineffective premarital counseling has become over the years. A new system is certainly worth considering, because continuing what is currently happening indeed defines insanity. While America doesn't have the highest divorce rate globally, it is undoubtedly one of the highest among developed nations. The highest divorce rate currently belongs to Luxembourg. The divorce rate of Luxembourg is a whopping 87%. The countries with the highest divorce rates happen to be westernized, modern countries with a high standard of living. Make a practical prenuptial agreement. One of the many misconceptions about signing a prenuptial agreement is that one person will get everything and another will get nothing. That certainly can happen, but only if one party is exceptionally naive or stupid or both. But it can also be a perfect tool to dodge a bullet. If you're practically on the honeymoon and head over heels in love with a mate that has no or negligible financial means, except you, of course, and won't marry you unless you rip up the agreement, my friend, you have dodged a bullet. Both parties should soberly look at what they will provide in the marriage, which should be the basis of the agreement. If it is household support, emotional support, being unified in public, not disgracing the household, and more, these are all things that the couples can negotiate as valuable. Someone who is not willing to negotiate is irrational, and that will also play out very poorly if or when it is time to divorce. If it is confusing and complicated initially, it will be disconnected and complex in the end. Carry on as friends and lovers, but never as husband and wife. We've all heard the stories where the husband ran off, leaving the wife with children and no means to make ends meet. There's also the scenario where one spouse promises to work while the other one goes to school, and when the first spouse finishes school, the other spouse will pursue education. Well, what do you know? The first spouse graduates from school and leaves the other spouse in the dust. Situations like these happen all of the time. And the one thing that could give the jilted partner recourse is the written agreement. Marriage is a business, and it is serious. Now, I am certainly not saying throw out love and good looks, but neither party should end up destitute and disgraced if open communication about what's important is in agreement. Another factor to consider when marrying a high net worth individual is reputation and relationships. Unless a prenuptial agreement specifies otherwise, both parties can often be required to remain silent about details within the marriage. That is a good practice for every socioeconomic group except in cases of emotional and physical abuse. Things like branding and reputation may not be as crucial for most regular people, but it is worthwhile to make realistic expectations for things like household duties, responsibilities, and budget. Will both spouses work? If so, dividing the responsibilities for any children becomes very important as well. I am not suggesting that pre-marriage counseling be done away with. On the contrary, these counseling services will do a much better service to society if both parties draft a simple contract that is practical and reasonable to live by. Of course, as life changes, it is always a good idea to make changes along the way. However, you'll feel a lot better about being head over heels once you have taken time to determine fundamental foundations and boundaries for your marriage. When it comes to Trump, prenuptial agreements have been his fortune's saving grace. It seems, coupled with his playboy behavior even during his marriages, the agreements were an absolute necessity. According to a copy of his prenuptial agreement with his second wife, Marla Maples, Trump had drawn some pretty harsh lines in the sand to protect himself and his wealth after a divorce. As per the agreement, he specified cutting off child support payments if the child gets a job, joins the military, and barred the ex-spouse from publishing details about the marriage. Here's what we know about the prenuptial agreements with all of his wives. In April of 1977, Trump married his first wife, Ivana Zelnikova. The couple modified their prenuptial agreements as their income and holdings expanded over time, resulting in at least 4 more drafted marriage contracts. Ivanka, Eric, and Donald Jr. were their 3 children from their 13-year marriage. They divorced in 1991 during Trump's affair with Marla Maples, an actress and model who ultimately became his second wife. Ivana Trump attempted to overturn the prenuptial agreement provisions to get half of Donald Trump's assets after the divorce, supposedly in the billions at the time. However, the final judge's decision was not in her favor, and she is said to have earned only $14 million and a few properties, far less than the $25 million guaranteed in one of the prenuptial agreements. In addition, Ivana Trump received the sum of $650,000 in child support for their 3 children. Donald Trump's second prenuptial agreement with Marla Maples was considerably stricter. According to claims from individuals close to him, his Playboy persona made business transactions more difficult, which may have influenced his decision to marry Maples in the end. Maples, on the other hand, was adamant about marrying Trump. According to a source close to them, she would even carry around her wedding gown if he ever wanted to marry. So, Trump had the upper hand in the prenuptial agreement because he insisted on drawing one. By then, Maples had given birth to their child, Tiffany. After much wrangling, she agreed to the conditions of the prenup the day before the wedding. What were the terms? In the event of their divorce, she would only receive $1 million, and she would never be able to disclose her narrative about their connection in any form. A long and detailed confidentiality agreement stated that no memoirs, interviews, images, writings, or other personal information would be published. Furthermore, the prenup said that, quote, in the event of any such breach, Donald will suffer irreparable harm and injury. According to the provisions of the prenuptial agreement, Maples received $1 million and another $1 million to buy a house when they separated in 1999. In addition, Tiffany Trump received $100,000 in child support, which was to end when she reached 21 or acquired a job, joined the military, or the Peace Corps. What are the terms of Donald Trump's prenuptial agreement with Melania Trump? While the specifics of Donald and Melania Trump's prenuptial agreement are unknown, it's known that they did agree to one. By the time Trump became the President of the United States, he was well versed in modifying a prenuptial agreement. However, Melania had learned a thing or two about negotiations and decided to take a moment to renegotiate the terms of their contract before taking office as First Lady of the United States. Donald Trump's relationships with his wives have been highly tumultuous, and his marriages have been somewhat turbulent, especially when we talk about the prenup agreements. After Donald Trump became the President of the United States, he also renegotiated his prenup agreement with his wife Melania. It makes perfect sense because of the size of the family, and the financial conditions never remained the same. This news might have never seen the light of day had the famous reporter and journalist for the Washington Post, Mary Jordan, not mentioned it in her book, which came out shortly after Trump was made President of the United States of America. Melania stayed home in New York while President Trump was in Washington, D.C., inaugurated to President of the United States. As a result, she did not attend the most important ceremony of her husband's political career. When questioned about her absence, she responded by saying that she didn't want to interrupt her son's school. Quote, she was using the time to cool off and leverage her absence in negotiations, as the president's allies wanted her in Washington to be a calming force for the president. The Art of Her Deal, The Untold Story of Melania Trump. A Post report on the book revealed some new things about Melania Trump. According to this report, she came to know a lot about her husband's somewhat scandalous election campaign, where he used defamation tactics to disqualify his opponents from running for the White House. However, there were some important things to be unfolded. Somewhere in the middle of the election campaign, a tape surfaced and spread like wildfire where Trump was joking about grabbing a woman by her genitals. That is something ridiculous about a person who is running for the President of the United States. However, she wasn't pleased to find out about these harsh realities concerning her husband. So instead, she used her newfound stature as the First Lady to rework and renegotiate her prenuptial agreement with Mr. Trump. Furthermore, her stay in New York City wasn't cheap at all. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the flights that she used as a means of transportation were also extravagant. According to Mrs. Trump, she was doing everything to safeguard her son and his future, and it made sense. Any mother in her right mind would have done the same. She also made it clear that she wanted her son Barron to enjoy the same facility and inheritance rights as Donald Trump's previous children that he had with Marla and Ivanka. Rise of the transactional marriage. The number of Americans who marry decreased dramatically over the last several decades. A few short decades ago, it was a standard expectation that women were married by the age of 30. It was a significant source of anxiety and the goal of most women to fit into this social construct. However, today, little over half of the women in their early 40s with a high school diploma or lesser education are married, compared to 3/4 of women with a bachelor's degree. In the 1970s, the gap was scarcely noticeable. Men's marriage rates have changed less over time, but the trend lines have flipped as well. 25% of men with a high school diploma or less have never married, compared to 23% of men with a bachelor's degree and 14% of those with advanced degrees. Meanwhile, divorce rates have risen among the less educated in recent decades, while remaining relatively stable among college graduates. The disparity in motherhood is considerably more pronounced. Compared to 6 out of 10 mothers with a high school diploma, fewer than 1 in 10 women with a bachelor's degree are unmarried at the time of their child's birth. Moreover, the proportion of such births has risen considerably among less educated moms in recent decades, whereas it has not changed for those who have completed college. While there are apparent variances between races, out-of-wedlock births have become significantly more common among white and non-white persons alike among those with less education. Failing marriage rates and rising out-of-wedlock births among the less educated caused increased income disparity. These figures are concerning in general because, while marriage is not a panacea, children raised in married households do better on a variety of behavioral and academic measures than children raised by single parents, or for that matter, children raised by parents who live together but are not married. Some studies say that what drives these disparities is that those most likely to marry differ from those who aren't, particularly in earnings. But of course, marriage itself is a disputed subject among researchers. Other research, however, shows that children of married parents have higher outcomes independent of their household's advantages. Whatever the case may be, it is evident that having married parents implies a child will receive more time, money, and perhaps most importantly, guidance and advice from parents. Why are fewer and fewer people with less education, the working class, entering and remaining in typical family arrangements? Some argue that the cultural values of the less educated have shifted, and this is somewhat true. However, a more remarkable shift is at the root of these changes. People with less education have found it more challenging to develop and maintain partnerships as good jobs have vanished. Furthermore, the United States' comparatively weak safety net makes the cost of being unemployed much higher than in other industrialized countries, leading many Americans to see staying married to a jobless partner as a transactional, economical decision. The financial costs of losing a job and the emotional and psychological effects of a culture highly values individual performance. Even in private topics of love and lifestyle, the larger societal structure, the state of the economy, the availability of excellent jobs, and so on, is significantly essential. What's love got to do with it? Marriage can easily be a means to increase your economic condition. While the institution is rooted in patriarchy, the common sense of marriage depends on the premise of two people coming together in holy matrimony, sharing the fortunes and luck of each other. The life expectancy of men drastically increases with marriage, while single women end up living the longest. So really, it could be argued pros and cons about getting married in the first place. But a prenuptial agreement could be the best tool for anyone deciding to enter a marriage. For a while now, the new generation, or a couple of generations that came before, started fantasizing about the idea of marriage being something enormously positive, romantic, and sweet. Sure enough, it is all those things when people are in love and genuinely care for one another. There's nothing more satisfying than settling down and spending the rest of your life with someone you love. Realistically, a monetary agreement is always part of the equation when two people settle down. Either you have money or you don't, and you will make the most of life with what you have. If we take a closer look, people have traditionally married for business reasons, not necessarily because they were emotionally connected. Moreover, being married has always carried a certain status, whether true or not, implying the person is a responsible, positive contributor to society. It even means that the person is normal and doing what is best for the community. In the worst-case scenario, it means, hey, someone's willing to put up with me, so I can't be all that bad. Now, we could go down a rabbit hole and not emerge for days trying to argue whether this is still accurate or even partially true. But the courtship phase of the relationship was used for kindling a spark or even seeing if the relationship was suitable. There were very tangible reasons people would marry, such as establishing a legacy, because they respected what either of them could offer each other and what they could bring to the table. Before people would get married, they would put certain conditions forward. Moreover, it was not just two people. In many cases, it was agreed that it was best within a family or community of people. They would end up as a married couple only when both parties agreed to those terms and conditions. Were those marriages successful in the long run? Not in all cases, but such agreements certainly cushioned the impact of divorce for both parties involved in the contract. I am not making an argument of going back to communal marriage practices. I am merely pointing out that more thought and consideration about what's significant, long-term consequences, and taking the time to write them down is not a new thing. Statistics don't lie, and all too often most of the work goes into the wedding event. Unfortunately, the same zeal and attention to detail are not often duplicated in the marriage, the main lifelong event. The modern American marriage, in 50% of the cases, is built on imagination and hope. That may work for a few years, but it does little to prepare for the long haul. There's also the young bride who has always dreamed of being a stay-at-home mother, and that is fine. But both partners need to understand and plan the burden of having one spouse bear all of the household expenses. Is that practical and reasonable? Is she willing to forego some conveniences to be able to stay at home? Would she consider working part-time if the family hit a rough patch? These are all things that should come up in an agreement. Likewise, being a homemaker has other challenges that need consideration. The homemaker never really gets to leave work, so to speak, and downtime should be considered. Some theories say in most cases men try to save their marriages, while women, on the other hand, find it easier to move on. This is because women have more support groups, divorce parties, talk shows, and other forms of emotional support that they need. Men, on the other hand, have a hard time adjusting. Not only is it emotionally very damaging for them, but they also don't receive the kind of support women tend to receive. Consider two people enter a marriage while one is financially stable and the other is not. The financially stable person will support the other person until they get used to a life of comfort and extravagance. However, if a time comes when either of the two parties decides to leave, the dependent spouse that has gotten used to living a life of comfort starts to feel entitled to the resources that the other spouse brings to the table. The cold reality is that good looks and a pleasant demeanor does not allow anyone to have permanent access to someone else's family legacy of hard work. A prenuptial agreement won't solve every problem, but it minimizes the potential for catastrophe in cases like this. People are often unaware of the breadth and scope of the marriage contract, which effectively implies that once they marry, all of their assets are hopelessly combined. The single most crucial financial decision a person will make in their lifetime is whether or not to say "I do," while the decision to say "I don't" is the second most important economic decision a person will make. Suppose a spouse in a marriage is likely to contribute disproportionately more in terms of assets to the wedding: income, property, and support. It's all consolidated into one marital pot. The lesser contributing spouse is now entitled to half of it. People take a rational, sensible, and business-like attitude when buying a car, a house, or other critical financial choices. They do their homework, study the fine print, and make informed decisions. When it comes time to finalize the decision, signing the contract is required and expected. So why is it that when it comes to marriage, the practical approach of drafting an agreement is ignored? When you say "I do," you're effectively handing the spouse half of your wealth, including the wealth you bring into the marriage and practically every asset during the marriage, occasionally after. A prenuptial agreement is an obvious way to safeguard your financial interests, but it also places value on a supportive, dependent partner as well. Unfortunately, too many people disregard them as just for the wealthy or assume they are a sign of impending divorce. Prenuptial agreements are also regarded as a cynical method to enter into a marriage. True, prenuptial agreements acknowledge the possibility of divorce, but to believe otherwise ignores the fact that about half of all marriages result in divorce. Moreover, because of the high divorce rate, now more than ever, it is critical to have your financial interests secured before marrying. Many states now consider premarital agreements to enhance a partnership rather than an enticement to divorce, damaging the marriage. Prenuptial agreements, quote, enable couples to ensure predictability, plan their future with more security, and most crucially, select their destiny, according to the Michigan Supreme Court. What is the purpose of a dowry? Historically, a dowry was paid to the groom and his family in exchange for the bride to ensure that she was well cared for and comfortable. It was also customary for the bride to leave her family home and live with or near her new husband's family. This present was intended to ensure financial security in widowhood and future financial stability for the couple's children. A dowry can be a conditional gift, expected to be returned in the event of the bride's divorce, abuse, or mistreatment. The dowry assisted the newlyweds in establishing their new household, particularly in societies where women rarely work outside the home. If a woman dies without boys, her husband must restore the dowry to the bride's family after reducing the price. After her husband's death, the bride is entitled to the entire dowry, which her offspring can only inherit. Evolution of dowry in modern times. The dowry has taken many forms over the years. Ultimately, the tradition evolved into the modern bridal shower and registry, where the bride expects people to gift her items that she may need for the marriage. I defy you to find a bride in America who does not consider the bridal shower gifts hers. Most men would agree. This assumption has real consequences, yet it is seldom in writing. It is time to put major assumptions in writing and plan for future outcomes and expectations. Take action. Every couple should set aside time to draft and sign a prenuptial agreement between sending out wedding invitations, finding the perfect venue, and ordering the cake. It may seem unromantic, but it's an essential step toward protecting yourself and your finances later in life. The best way to avoid losing everything in a divorce is to get a prenuptial agreement. Contrary to popular belief, having these conversations will not destroy your relationship. In fact, it may strengthen it. Getting a prenuptial agreement has the added benefit of forcing couples to get into the nitty-gritty of their finances and how they think about money. People will have to stop relying on fairy tales about marriage and get honest and genuine about what matters most. Even if you aren't currently wealthy, the best way to keep your head is to start using it. If it worked for Trump at least 3 times, it could certainly work for you. Chapter 2. False Teachers, False Religion. Our republic was formed on the basis that freedom is not a gift from the government, but that freedom is a gift from God. Donald Trump. Thomas Jefferson would not be elected president today if he ran for office. Even if blatant anachronisms like slavery were removed, as well as his poor public speaking skills, Jefferson would still be polling poorly. Moreover, the rationale would be blatantly apparent among the current candidates. Jefferson was a vocal opponent of organized religion. Jefferson's odd religious beliefs, he denied Jesus' divinity and campaigned for a strict separation of church and state, were a source of difficulty in the 1800 election, when the opposition said, "Any Christian needs to vote against this essential atheist." Nonetheless, he was elected and is today regarded as a founding father. If presidential candidates want to win more than 2 centuries later, they must publicly embrace a strong faith. An event during the 2016 race exemplifies how far things have progressed. While campaigning in South Carolina in May 2015, Hillary Clinton, a longtime Methodist, strolled into a bakery and got up a conversation with a client about a passage he was reading in his Bible. Clinton's support grew as a result of their conversation. The man, who was a Baptist minister, later explained to CNN in an interview that the former Secretary of State's Bible knowledge, quote, "is important in my world. I'd like to know that my president has some religious beliefs." Today, it's almost impossible to win the U.S. election without showing the candidate is serious about religion and practices with commitment. That said, how has religion played an important role in Trump's presidency? During Donald Trump's first term in office, there has been no shortage of God talk, with the president conferring and praying with the small group of evangelical advisors regularly. The 45th president of the United States even declared himself to be, quote, "the chosen one" at one point. Perhaps the most telling story of Trump's administration is how he got there in the first place, by garnering 80 to 81% of evangelicals who voted in 2016. His ability to win over evangelical Christians perplexed commentators and political analysts. They wondered why so-called value voters would support a candidate who stumbled over Bible scriptures, used coarse language frequently, and filmed bragging about sexual assault. All this despite strong resistance from several evangelical leaders, including Russell Moore, the chair of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. However, Trump's appeal to evangelical Christians would become a cornerstone of his first term in office, with the president occasionally explicitly admitting that he tailored some of his policy positions to please them. Let's take a look at how President Trump gained religious support to get political power in the U.S., and how different heads of state used the same tactic in the world. In January 2017, a Muslim travel ban triggered a religious uproar. February 2017, Trump finally condemns anti-Semitism. May 2017, Trump signs executive order limiting the power of the Johnson Amendment. May 2018, new U.S. embassy opens in Jerusalem. May 2018, prominent evangelicals appointed to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. June 2018, religious outcry over zero-tolerance family separation policy. July 2018, Brett Kavanaugh appointed to Supreme Court. December 2018, criminal justice reform passed with ample support from evangelical leaders. September 2019, Trump joins Modi at a rally shortly after India's Kashmir decision. October 2019, Andrew Brunson released. November 2019, Paula White appointed to run the White House Faith Office. December 2019 to February 2020, impeachment debate. January 2020, Trump appears at March for Life rally. June 2020, Uyghur Human Rights Act signed. Religion often gives our lives purpose by defining values about how we interact with one another. But just as religion has the power to bring people together, it can also divide individuals who are not of the same faith and do not share the same traditions and rituals. Religious signaling through symbols and imagery can assist would-be authoritarians in cementing their authority when enough people sense, or can be convinced, that traditional aspects of the social fabric are in jeopardy. Then, they portray themselves as defenders of the faith and opponents of anyone who challenges tradition. Russians may have witnessed this dynamic where President Vladimir Putin formed a strategic relationship with the Russian Orthodox Church. Putin, for one, portrays himself not only as a strong leader, but as a devoutly religious Russian. The giant crucifix he wears around his neck is always visible when he is shirtless, for example. Meanwhile, the Church promotes ancient moral norms and separates from the Orthodox Christian world, thus distinguishing the, quote, really Russian from the outsider Putin, and the Church recently proposed constitutional revisions to codify Russians' faith in God, define marriage as a union of a man and a woman, and proclaim, quote, the magnificent success of the Russian people in defense of the fatherland, along with other things. These amendments to the Constitution, meant to bolster Putin's support base, would be jarringly nationalistic. Putin takes advantage of the insider-outsider dynamic to further his objective of restoring Russia to its former territorial grandeur. Putin also justified Russia's invasion of Crimea by claiming that the religion held, quote, sacred value for Russia, similar to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem for Muslims and Jews. It's a lot simpler to justify defending and extending Russian territory by representing it as protecting the, quote, holy. Using religion symbolism. In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's hold on power is partly based on his endorsement of Hindu nationalism that promotes Hindus as, quote, really Indian insiders while singling out Muslims as outsiders. Modi, like Putin, is engulfed in religious imagery. He pays high-profile visits to isolated Hindu temples during electioneering and never wears green because of its affiliation with Islam. While campaigning in 2014, Prime Ministerial candidate Narendra Modi visited a shrine on horseback. Modi's Hindu nationalism strengthens his appeal among devout Hindus, while also bolstering public support for anti-Muslim policies, such as withdrawing the autonomy of India's only majority Muslim state and adopting a contentious new rule barring Muslim migrants from obtaining Indian citizenship. As a savior. Trump has faltered in his effort to present himself as a devout Christian, declining to cite a favorite Bible passage and claiming that he has never sought God's forgiveness for his misdeeds. Nonetheless, public opinion polls routinely show that Christians make up most of Trump's supporters, despite recent signs of a decline even among this critical group. While it's crucial to recognize that many Christians oppose Trump, at least one-third of evangelicals felt God appointed him. Trump succeeds in portraying himself as a Christian nationalist in the same way that Putin and Modi show themselves as staunch protectors of their respective countries' prominent religions. Trump achieves this goal in part by making statements like this one from earlier this year on the campaign trail. Quote, we're going to win another huge triumph for faith and family, God and country, flag and freedom. According to sociologists Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry in their new book, Taking America Back for God, many of Trump's Christian followers see him as their long-awaited savior. Not just the protector of traditional religion, but also the defender of an ancient way of life. In this era, men provided, protected, and set moral standards for the family. It was common for families to attend church every Sunday, and outsiders understood their place. Trump's Make America Great Again slogan may have been successful due to a profound longing for a return to the past. That term can almost be understood as, quote, making Christianity culturally dominant again, as is argued every time the Capitol protests happened. Thousands of Christian supporters of President Donald Trump descended in Washington, D.C. to protest the removal of Donald Trump. Their presence drew attention to a schism in American Christianity. Why? Some had even knelt to pray a week before the march on the U.S. Capitol. Thousands of people had gathered in front of the White House for a Save America demonstration to protest the election results. Instead, Mr. Trump spoke to a crowd near the White House, encouraging people to march on Congress to certify President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Trump supporters were carrying religious symbols, Trump banners, and the stars and stripes of the U.S. flag. Jesus 2020 campaign flags flailed in the breeze. The crowd did march to Congress, resulting in mayhem in the Capitol. At least one group carried a giant wooden cross. Another blew shofars, a Jewish ritual horn adopted as a battle cry by some Christian evangelicals. A white flag with an ichthus or Jesus fish with old Christian emblems flown elsewhere. Seeing religious symbols beside Confederate flags was disturbing to some. There appeared to be a growing divide, not based on anything Donald Trump directly said or denied. It could have been because individual groups believed he would support or destroy hope in the American dream. His Christian conversion and his slogan struck a lot of emotion and tension in the hearts of the American people. Ethnicity became the dividing factor, though I don't believe it was intentional. He interacted with people that helped promote and sustain his vision as an American leader. He also addressed head-on questions that the American people have had for a while and that no other president seemed to care about or be able to handle. On the other hand, some saw Mr. Trump as a savior, someone who was, quote, defending Christians from secularists, as Franklin Graham, the son of the late evangelist Billy Graham, told the BBC. A swarm of devout religious supporters of President Trump held a Jericho march in Washington the day before the gathering. They marched around the Capitol, waving crosses and singing Christian hymns, reenacting the biblical account of the Israelites besieging the enemy city of Jericho. The images shown revealed not only America's racial and political divides, but also its religious conflicts. According to exit polls, about 4/5 of evangelicals, who make up a quarter of the American voters, backed Trump in 2020, as they did in 2016. Ever since evangelicals have become a political force to be reckoned with in the late 1940s, the religious right campaigned against access to abortions, wanting to bolster religious freedom laws and encouraging support and assistance for Israel. Why wouldn't Trump have their support when he has delivered in all of these areas? The Trump administration limited funds for groups that supported abortions, appointed more than 200 conservative judges to federal courts and 3 judges to the U.S. Supreme Court. While the Obama administration was not as amicable with the State of Israel, Trump was instrumental in moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which was also a deep and long-held wish among many evangelicals. Over and above what Trump has done, evangelicals donate several $1 million every year to Israel. That made the support of Israel by President Trump not only a breath of fresh air, it made him seem like not only the choice of the people, but the choice of God. Even though evangelicals provided blatant and irrevocable support, his supporters also admit that Trump does have flaws. For example, one of his most loyal supporters, the leader of a Texas megachurch, has described the former president as no altar boy. According to him, Trump didn't pretend to be overly pious and religious, but evangelical Christians didn't vote for him in enormous numbers because of his piety. Instead, they supported Trump for his public policies. Apart from specific campaign concerns, Christian nationalism was the driving force behind much of Mr. Trump's spiritual support. Christian nationalism combines religious and national identities. To be an American is to be a Christian. Proponents feel that America's success is contingent on its commitment to conservative Christian values, and they warn of political opponents' attack on Christianity, as Mr. Trump put it. For many Americans, voting for Trump was similar to defending the country's perceived Christian heritage. That is one reason why Trump, throughout his presidency, pandered to the Christian audience, highlighting purely Christian nationalistic ideas, all the while repeating that the people of the United States are leaving their Christian heritage behind. At a rally in Ohio, he even went as far as to warn a Biden presidency would mean, quote, no religion, no anything. Hurt the Bible, hurt God. He's against God. He's against guns. Although Trump has lived more or less the opposite of a Christian lifestyle, many evangelicals saw him as their heaven-sent ally, an instance of God's well-known habit of working in mysterious ways, although he's not a faithful churchgoer or even an avid reader of the Bible. All of it was to illustrate and tell the American public why he was a superior candidate to promote Christian nationalism as much as he loved to preach the Bible. But, unfortunately, when a reporter questioned him why he was holding up a Bible for his violence-enabled photo op in Lafayette Square, his show of religious symbolism backfired on him. Quote, is that your Bible? He replied, it's a Bible. It appeared as though he was implying, unsurprisingly, that this Bible did not belong to him and that the actual owner was unknown. Ivanka Trump had carried it in a fancy handbag on her way from the White House to St. John's Church and given it to her father to pose with. But it wasn't hers either. After the picture shoot, nobody came up claiming this Bible as their own and taking pleasure in it, having been a part of such a historical event. Of course, there are millions of Bibles in circulation that no one formally owns. Perhaps this was merely a copy on hand at the White House. Bibles that are the general property of the court are available in courtrooms for the swearing in of witnesses. A court may alternatively supply a copy of the Torah at the request of a witness. In more diverse areas, courts may also provide Qurans and Bhagavad Gita. There is also the option of not swearing on any text at all. Atheists, for example, are not required to raise their right hands and swear on a hardback copy of Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, but can affirm that what they say is true. Judges remind jurors that a witness who chooses to affirm rather than swear is likely to be telling the truth. Only a Bible would suffice for Trump's goals in Lafayette Square, as he was again claiming America and Christianity. For me, as a constitutional law attorney, as an American, and as a Christian, all those things came together for me that moment, his senior legal advisor Jenna Ellis later told the Washington Post. Both sides were absolutely Christian in previous existential fights in America. Confederate troops worshipped at revival meetings, often led by their generals during the Civil War, and Union Army units marched while singing the battle hymn of the Republic. Only the Trump camp now embraces the faith, having prepared it for battle during the so-called Christmas War, in which Trump appears to have subdued the enemy to his satisfaction. He said, quote, "We will give the American people a tremendous, magnificent Christmas present," when unveiling his massive tax reduction for corporations and the wealthy late in 2017, thereby merging the father and son, God and money, who would be himself. Meanwhile, the anti-Trump camp has remained formally unclad in sacred armor, maybe to avoid leaving anyone out. After all, it's a vast country, and the many millions of non-evangelicals outnumber Trump's evangelical supporters. Aftermath of the violent Capitol protests by Trump supporters. If we have learned one thing from the happenings of the past year, the American clergy are very quick to disown a pawn who is playing their own game for them. As quickly as Trump rose to power and popularity, the former president was thrown off the pedestal just as fast. As soon as trouble arose, Christians began to backpedal, stutter, and recant Trump's, quote, divine appointment. The aftermath of the violent Capitol protests wasn't pretty for Trump, considering Christian leaders gave statements against the event and tried to distance themselves from Trump immediately. The faculty of a prominent evangelical college issued a statement claiming that the events at the Capitol, quote, bear no similarity to the Christianity they teach. And Christian writers noted for their thoughtfulness worry that somehow white supremacy has infiltrated into our churches. They're telling us that mob is a marginal element. They've entirely misread American Christianity's valid message. This misrepresentation could hardly be more untrue. The Capitol crowd has a fundamental misunderstanding of Jesus' teachings and life. However, it is an inescapable conclusion of white American Christianity. Did we forget America was founded on religious freedom from England? That freedom, my friend, was not free. Whether it was the Boston Tea Party or building an alliance with France, civil disruption has always been a staple of this country. Am I saying get your gun and start another riot, or pick up where January 6th left off? Heavens no, that would not be a wise strategy. I can say with certainty that the Democrats have used a well-thought-out approach to gain electoral victory. The only thing that beats strategy is strategy, and not brazen passion. Christianity today is nothing more than a social club of fearful, faithless, weak-minded wimps. I can say that with conviction because I grew up in a Christian household. Here's what else I can tell you about Christianity. It is one of the most dangerous organizations on the planet, and I highly recommend that you be very cautious while joining or maintaining your church membership. There is so much politically correct cowardice going on that many people have exiled themselves to their homes. It's not an outside force attacking you, but many lack the courage to do the right thing when it is time. We are way past the right time. We expect it only to come from the government. At this rate, there won't be a government left. So what happened to Trump's Christian support? It appears that they were only a fair-weather support. After all, the evangelicals really can't be counted on as the nation's moral compass if they run for cover at every sign of trouble. Of course, when they're not running for cover, they might just be running from scandal. And there's been too many of those to count. Hands down, the Democratic Party has a better strategy than the Republican Party. Your rights are taken away without one soldier, one police officer, or even one bullet. Your voice has been labeled as misinformation, your accounts deactivated, and you told that you were the cause of the disease instead of the lab where it originated. If Republicans are going to make a comeback, it will take a well-planned strategy. Strategy beats strategy every day of the week. The days of impassioned marches are over. Far be it for me to lay out that strategy, but I may have a few recommendations in later chapters. Either way, Republicans need to shift into first gear to regain leadership and respect of the American people. Now let's be clear on what I do believe. I believe in the God of the Bible, I believe in Jesus, and I believe in the Holy Spirit. But I refuse to let some politician or preacher claim to be doing the will of God while changing narratives every 5 minutes and refusing to let people speak and hear the facts about what is going on. The Bible warns about deception in the last days. Well, if the church is not going to speak up for what is right, the deception will ultimately lead to the destruction of our nation. However, without this confrontation, there can be no healing. You can't cure cancer by acting as if it doesn't exist. The church can no longer pretend that the capital mob isn't a part of American ideology. What can we learn from this debacle? Religion and politics go hand in hand. In fact, the religious right often supports individuals who might forward their agenda, promoting their politicians constantly to the point of idolatry. But they are just as quick to dismiss such individuals if their interests are harmed in any way. Yes, the evangelical right, you are partly to blame. I knew there was a religious breakdown in Trump's camp when Paula White, Trump's appointed religious leader, summoned angels from Africa. Well, I'm not sure where Paula got her religious degree from, but I can't find angels from Africa in any of the Bibles that I currently own. Trump has learned firsthand how slippery it could be working with religious support. Be very careful when you align yourself with someone. Even though the badge says clergy, it doesn't make the person genuine or more valuable, and it certainly doesn't guarantee they know more of what God's intentions are than the man on the moon. What that means is, if Trump were ever to run again, the last people I would want to hear from is his team of clergy. Chapter 3. What is in that bill? We must speak our minds openly, debate our disagreements honestly, but always pursue solidarity. Donald Trump. Millions of struggling Americans spent the holidays last year without knowing whether they would be employed or not. The situation had become so bad that people did not know what would become of their problems, families, or future. There was talk of a stimulus package. But with President Trump's last-minute opposition to the stimulus package, Americans had lost all hope. They couldn't count on more unemployment benefits, another stimulus check, or not getting evicted from their homes by landlords. Amidst the pandemic-inflicted economic pain already on the people and businesses, months of messy negotiations followed. A deal was finally struck by lawmakers who constructed a $900 billion stimulus package to extend unemployment benefits for 11 weeks, sending Americans direct payments of $600. Lawmakers also continued the ban on national eviction for another month at the very least. However, the president again shocked and dismayed the Capitol by calling the package a disgrace. He further went on to say, quote, "The next administration will have to deliver a COVID relief package if Congress doesn't significantly amend the bill." What made the package a disgrace was that the bill had a list of demands that looked like the Christmas list of the UN. It's interesting to note that one of Trump's main requests was shot down by the House Republicans, which was to triple the direct payments to Americans by $2,000 from $600, which was the agreed-upon number. Following this development, the fate of the entire aid package became incredibly uncertain. What were some of the critical relief measures Americans would have lost if the respective parties didn't sign the stimulus bill? Unemployment benefits. The stimulus package of $900 billion that lawmakers had agreed upon included $120 billion in extra unemployment benefits. Additionally, the benefits would extend for unemployed Americans for 11 weeks. Self-employed and freelancers received an extra $100 every week. In addition, they would also receive a $300 a week federal boost. According to the Labor Department, more than 20 million people in the U.S. currently collect unemployment benefits from the government. If the president did not sign the stimulus bills, at least 10 million jobless people would lose their benefits. Stimulus checks. Since the president didn't approve the original stimulus package, Americans didn't receive the $600 direct payments that lawmakers included in the bill. Otherwise, the checks would have been obtained by adults and children. Individuals with up to $75,000 in adjusted gross income would have received the full payment, as well as married couples earning up to $150,000. What about people who earned more than those levels? The funds would have phased out gradually for those people. Protection from eviction and rental assistance. The national eviction prohibition imposed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will expire at the end of the month. The coronavirus aid agreement prolonged the embargo until January and established a $25 billion rental assistance fund that households may utilize to cover rent arrears and current rent. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, more than 14 million Americans, or 1 in every 5 adult renters, are behind on their rent payments. If President Trump had not extended the ban, millions of Americans would have been out of their homes and apartments during one of the coldest months of the year and a pandemic. According to recent research, evictions result in significantly more coronavirus cases and deaths in a given area. Finally, a deal was agreed on by the Trump administration with Senate Democrats and Republicans. It was a much-needed decision and a historic rescue package that amounted to more than $2 trillion in spending and tax breaks. It is assumed that the bill would boost the hobbling U.S. economy and help stem the coronavirus by funding the nationwide effort. According to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who said on March 25th while on the chamber's floor, quote, "At last we have a deal. I'm thrilled that we're finally going to deliver to the country." Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer took the occasion to present his thoughts on the development, calling it, quote, "an outstanding agreement." Although the bill was still in the works, McConnell predicted the Senate would vote on it Wednesday. However, before it reaches President Donald Trump's desk, it must first pass the House. Throughout his conversations with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had communicated with Schumer. The package contains around $500 billion in loan and support funds for businesses, including $50 billion for loans to U.S. airlines and state and local governments. It also has over $350 billion in funds to help small enterprises. Then there's the $150 billion in equipment and supplies for hospitals and other healthcare providers. What about the direct payments? Individually, the package includes direct payments of $1,200 for each adult and $500 for each child to low- and middle-income Americans. In addition, unemployment insurance would be prolonged for another 4 months, with benefits increased by $600 per week and eligibility broadened to include additional people. Democrats pushed for and gained a set of restrictions on companies that get Treasury Department loans or investments, as well as a method to monitor who gets the money. Any corporation receiving a government loan will be prohibited from buying back stock for the duration of the loan plus an additional year. They'd also have to put a cap on CEO incentives and make efforts to safeguard workers. In addition, the Treasury Department would be required to make loans or other aid terms public, and a new Treasury Inspector General would oversee the lending programs. Democrats also gained wording that would prevent any business owned by Trump or his family from receiving Treasury loans. Members of Congress, leaders of executive departments, and Vice President Mike Pence's companies would all be barred. The stimulus plan's scale is unparalleled, dwarfing Obama's $800 billion stimulus package, which passed 5 months after the 2008 financial crisis. The package will almost certainly trouble the United States budget deficit, which was on track to reach $1 trillion this year before the epidemic. Moreover, this may not be the final round of government investments in reaction to the spread of the virus. As the country's economy deteriorates and the health picture worsens, lawmakers across the board expressed a sense of urgency. As the number of known infections rises, the World Health Organization predicts that the United States will become the new epicenter of the global pandemic. The idea is Congress's third and most ambitious attempt to address the coronavirus epidemic as the disease spreads. Now, before going any further, I want to address some points from a completely different perspective. The bill in question was over 5,000 pages. It's like what on God's green earth needs 5,000 pages to explain? That's War and Peace by Tolstoy times 5. That's Les Miserables times 3.5. That's mind-boggling, to say the least. You get the idea. I'm convinced that if it takes 5,000 pages to explain, it's not in my best interest. It was also said that the stimulus included aid to foreign countries like Egypt and Myanmar. The bill easily looked like a Christmas list from the UN. There were other requests for the arts and environmental issues like addressing issues with Asian carp. In comparison, I'm not opposed to these issues getting addressed. I agree that a COVID bill wasn't the place to do it. It also made me appreciate that President Trump was vocal about what was reckless in the bill. I thought about the countless bills that get passed all the time under one name, while underwriting several hidden agendas hiding behind the first few thousand pages. I would fully support snapshots of each bill passed that give the specific issues addressed in bullet points on the first page of the bill, so I don't have to read until page 4,573 to learn that sex offenders won't be named anymore in my neighborhood. I'm very appreciative that President Trump took the time to understand the bill instead of give a blanket signature relying solely on advisors. A good negotiator will always know what's at stake. Over the years, President Trump has given a lot of insight on how he contemplates his next steps. What Trump has said and done when his back was against the wall in a room full of naysayers could fill the pages of any self-help book on the market. Always think big. According to his book, The Art of the Deal, Trump likes to think about the big picture, or just big in general. Quote, "I like thinking big. I always have. To me, it's simple. If you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big. Take care of the downside, and the upside will take care of itself. Always think of the worst possible scenario and its consequences, because then you'll prepare yourself for all situations. Quote, I always go into the deal anticipating the worst. If you plan for the worst, if you can live with the worst, the good will always take care of itself." Increase your options. Having options and a backup plan is a good idea. Try all avenues before settling for the best one. Quote, "I never get too attached to one deal or one approach. I keep a lot of balls in the air because most deals fall out no matter how promising they seem at first." Know your market. Understanding your competitors and your clients is the key to success. Once you know what the people want and you can deliver, you are then on the journey to success. Quote, "I like to think that I have that instinct. That's why I don't hire a lot of number crunchers and I don't trust fancy marketing surveys. I do my own surveys and draw my own conclusions." Use the leverage you have. It is an excellent option to use any ethical method to gain leverage on your competitor, helping you get a fair advantage and doesn't leave room for animosity against your competitors. Quote, "The worst thing you can possibly do in a deal is seem desperate to make it. That makes the other guy smell blood, and then you're dead." Quote, "One thing I've learned about the press is that they're always hungry for a good story, and the more sensational, the better. The point is that if you are a little different, a little outrageous, or if you do things that are bold or controversial, the press is going to write about you." Push back with all you have got. No matter how honest you are, there will always be people you encounter who want to see you fail. To save yourself from them, you need to push back all the negativity that they feed you and stay away from the toxic environment they create for you. Quote, "In most cases, I'm very easy to get along with. I'm very good to people who are good to me. But when people treat me badly or unfairly or try to take advantage of me, my general attitude all my life has been to fight back very hard."
And that concludes our presentation. We want to give our warmest, most sincere thanks to those who joined us tonight. This has been an accomplishment from the AlexCarlisle Group on so many levels that they would like to show their gratitude by extending a special offer for the PDF audiobook bundle. For those of you who would like to get your copy of AlexCarlisle's 10 Things You Were Supposed to Learn from Donald Trump, go directly to the website, AlexCarlisleBooks.com, and use the code LIVELAUNCH to purchase the ebook and audio bundle for the low price of $30. That price will only be available from tonight through Cyber Monday. After Cyber Monday, the price will be slightly higher. As an added bonus, the AlexCarlisle Group will make this launch week. This live recording will be available through Cyber Monday. After Cyber Monday, you will have to purchase the audiobook on AlexCarlisleBooks.com. Continue the celebration of this event with your personal copy, 10 Things You Were Supposed to Learn from Donald Trump. Or get a copy for a friend. You won't be disappointed. This is the talk of the town and book launch event of the season. Get your celebration copy while you still can. Remember to use the code LIVELAUNCH for the discount. This is Bob Dunsworth speaking. It's been my pleasure to be your host this evening, and I really hope you've enjoyed your time with us. We believe this is a great way to kick off the rest of your holiday season. So we say, thanks again. 10 Things You Were Supposed to Learn from Donald Trump, the most important book you'll buy this year. Good evening, and happy holidays to all.